I work for an organisation called Nominet Trust. It's a social investor and a grant maker that supports projects that use technology to address social challenges. Hurrah. That's the kind of short version. We support lots of stuff. That's good. We do some research. That's also good. I'll talk about a bit more of that in a bit. Oh, amazing. Thank you. That's... Oh, which button is that? Hey, awesome. Shoot you in the eye, you'll go blind. No, So where we occupy is this kind of space, right? Which is between the affordances of technology, designing from first principles, trying to understand the root of what we're trying to do, and then also social enterprise and entrepreneurship. Yeah, so three factors that are the essence of the types of work that we engage in and support. What I want to talk to you a bit about today, leading neatly on, is the digital making piece, right? So if you think about what's going on in digital technology, over the last 20, 30 years, we've had a massive web-enabled revolution. What I mean by that is structures, organizations, businesses, institutions are able to deliver and create more access to their services by using the web as an integral part of their delivery mechanism. It means that they're able to scale very quickly and easily, right? Amazon, frankly, doesn't care if it's got 10,000 people or 10 million people. It will just buy more web space to deal with it. It's a bit of a simplification, but that's essentially the heart of it. So that's quite good, right? And that's led to a lot of really interesting things and massive global names. What we're going on right now, literally right now, is another revolution, and it's the open hardware revolution. Can you let me know if you've heard the term open hardware before? Cool, that's good. Okay, if you'd all said it, I'd just go home. But some of you have, which is good, so you can tell me if I'm wrong. There's a couple of things, if you're interested in this, and I think you should be, because it's going to be it is the next thing. This is quite a good book, but it's all right, by Chris Anderson, which is about making, digital making, this idea of digital making. And have you come across open source before, presumably? Yes, open source, the idea that the code is actively opened up, so other people can access and change what you're doing. Open hardware is those principles, but applied to physical things. So in the old days, you'd make your thing, you'd lock it up, you wouldn't let anyone else see your blueprints and your plans, unless you were Wile E. Coyote, in which case you'd show them to the camera. But this open hardware space is about saying, no, I want other people to understand how I have made things. So coming into a space where you're talking about galleries and museums, which is fundamentally, essentially an artistic creative process, I think that's quite an interesting concept. Opening up how you access and create what you do. So a couple of other things that's probably worth thinking about is some of the approaches that we take in this kind of space. And the Lean Startup is a great book about how you rapidly iterate. You don't say, I'm going to know what I'm going to do in 3 years' time. If you've ever who's written like a 3-year strategy in here for their business things? Anyone? Yeah? It's always out of date within like a year, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen. And the rapidly and dynamically changing environment we're living in today means that's ever more the case. So the principles, why I bring this up, is it's about, instead of just thinking you're going to know what's happening, you create very rapid iterations or versions of what you're doing, and you change it according to feedback over time. It's a really liberating approach, because it means you don't have to have all the answers up front. You say, this is kind of enough to get people to understand what I'm doing. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about some of the things that you could use to kind of do this. If I stand here, it's going to be awkward. If I stand here, it's going to be awkward. I'm sorry, so I'll stand over here. Have you come across Arduinos before? Tell me if you have. Some of us have. Okay, some of us haven't. Who hasn't, by the way? Good. Who's asleep? Okay, just you. So the idea of Arduino is one of these open source hardware platforms. It's created in Italy, basically initially for design students, to help them get access to electronics to be able to do cool stuff. It's pretty simple. There's a massive community of people online who share what they do. You can do pretty much anything with it. This person creates kind of wearable stuff. So she's made like a biker jacket that indicates. It's quite sweet. This one is this is a flame-throwing pumpkin, which is just awesome, right? And this is beautiful. It's a sigh collector. So the idea is it's a microphone that sits next to you, and it collects how many times you sigh during the day, and it gives you a sadness rating. It's just beautiful, right? And it's because someone said, I want to make that. So they did. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the beauty of it, right? This is some other stuff. So this Raspberry Pis, anyone heard of those? A few more of us, because they've got a better marketing team, right? So have you heard this story, Babbage? Who has? Because I don't want to say anything you know already. So some of us have already. Okay, so Babbage is this bear. This is Babbage, this is his bum, this is his head. And Babbage was, you know that Felix Baumbauer thing? The guy went to like the outer reaches of space, did the highest skydive in the world, 30 million pounds, 5 million years in the making. 2 weeks later, a guy I think called Dave from Shropshire says, I'll have a bit of that. And he gets a Raspberry Pi and shoves it up a teddy bear's bum and sends the teddy bear to space. And then the teddy bear does the highest skydive ever. And he's 30 meters above Felix Van Bauer, which is just brilliant. And for 200 quid, right? So my point is, you've got this amazing capacity to create yourself, yeah? That's amazing, to really furnish and accessibly create. He's not a computer scientist or a genius, yeah? He's just got access to a lot of resource. 3D printing, that's good, that's an ear, if you haven't seen it. 3D printing ears. Another thing, RepRap, who came up with, RepRap is an open source printer, so you can print one yourself. There's a version they just came out with MakerBot, like less than 500 quid now, to buy a 3D printer. That's pretty nuts, right? If you think about access to that technology that a few years ago would have cost tens of thousands, today you can get one for less than you could get a LaserJet for when they first came out, right? This is crazy. What I'm saying is that this stuff is uber accessible these days. And so we need to think about using it. So the other thing is coding. I'm not really going to talk about this too much because it's pretty obvious. We know the role of coding. There's a whole heap of organizations out there to support you and young people to get coding. Everything from paid for online courses to people like Freeformers who train young people in coding and then go and work with big organizations to get them back into work. So there's an amazing world of stuff going on at this point, and loads of free resources to teach you how to do it. The reason I talk about this is I'm saying the equipment's there, the ability and online communities to support you to do it are there. So the only thing that's left is figuring out how are we going to use it, right? Yeah, and the point is it's happening. So I think it's a good thing to get on board with because it's fun. And you can build side collectors and flame pumpkins, which is a good thing. So an organization, a couple of guys who are doing this in museums and galleries, I thought would be useful to flag up. Coda Design, if you haven't heard of them, they're awesome. They do a lot of work in museums and galleries. Their whole point here is about a kind of creative engagement with technology to enable them to access the cultural artifacts that people are seeing. So they go in and do really fun stuff with all ages. This actually happened in the Tate. This is why I've got it here. They did a workshop here with some people to enable them to access some of the collections and to creatively respond. This is nice because it's a Play-Doh that is conductive, so you can kind of make circuits out of Play-Doh, which is like a really beautiful idea for me because it's saying, and it's picking up on your point, right, about enabling technology to be a route to access rather than a window that you have to look through. Does that sort of make sense? I think that's quite an important metaphor if you think about visual art, at least. Anyway, cool. So this another bunch of guys up in the West Midlands, Black Country Atelier, who also do amazing stuff. And their whole point is to do a similar thing. They use technology to enable young people to access this stuff. But their thing is about if I get a kid to make something, they'll totally understand that process of making, and they'll have a better insight into the worlds of manufacturing and all that kind of stuff. But you do it through learning, right? That's got to be a good thing. So they're good and they're fun, so they're definitely worth checking out as well. And then another bunch of guys called Technology Will Save Us, who some of you may have heard of. Yeah, because they're a bit more active in this sector potentially at the moment, who make kits. And they basically make kits to support young people to make stuff. So this is a do-it-yourself Game Boy, which is lovely. So the idea is like, you love gaming and stuff, but isn't it more cool if you make it yourself because you understand the processes that underpin it? So again, my reflection here is taking this from outside, slightly outside the sector, and playing it back to say, well, isn't this interesting? What would you do if someone was going to make it themselves in your work? Right, I think that's a fun kind of concept. And technology can just do it in quite an engaging way sometimes. Yeah, another thing that's really good about them, oh, thank you, is that they're all about going to the spaces that young people occupy themselves. So the reason the Gamer came up is we funded this work actually. They did some really amazing kind of like grounds up research about what young people wanted to use technology in, and things came back like I wanted to build a concentration robot, or I want a new way to talk to my friends. So they made like an electronic version of cups, which is like, cups, like with the thing, right? Where you've got the string between it, but it works on radio frequencies, so you can have a much longer reach. So it's like building your own walkie-talkie, but it's a really amazing way of getting them engaged in that process of creation. So that's them, their race. If you're interested in getting involved with this stuff, the point is you don't really have official curriculums to learn this sort of thing. You learn it through communities and through engaging and through sharing your expertise. So it's inherently horizontal. Yeah, and there's some good places going on out there that you might want to think about engaging with. Hackspaces, come across Hackspaces? Yeah, London Hackspace is a bit crazy, but it's a really good place to go. Makerversity has taken over the ground floor of Somerset House. It's an amazing space where people can come in to learn about making. They rent workshops, they run activities led by a really cool guy called Tom. Definitely worth chatting to Makerversity. The Makerspace is in Newcastle, just in case anyone comes from Newcastle. So the point is, it's a distributed organisation all over. This is kind of what I'm saying. It's like a kind of movement more than a top-down approach. So this is where you can get involved. That's why I mention it. A couple of things to mention is that's kind of reasons why it's important. This is a nice piece of research that we did, which is around mapping the journeys of young people engaging in digital making. That's quite important because you want to support people to develop skills. You need to know what journeys they go through. So that's a piece of free research to download on the site, should you be interested, written by quite a leading author. And because we're getting quite close to time, I'm going to talk about this, which is Make Things Do Stuff, which is a big campaign that we launched with Nesta and Mozilla, who made Firefox as a web browser, to basically get young people involved in this kind of stuff. The idea for me is this thing, that if we think about it this way, when we try and get people involved in creative skills, we often try and get them involved in a vertical of skills in a particular discipline, and we don't think about how we support them to step across to other disciplines and other worlds. So we come up with arbitrary divisions, and I've got a theatre background, between theatre and visual art or whatnot. And kind of the point for me is about how do you support people to move across those spaces as much as you support them to do verticals between it. That's the principles that underpin this type of work, and it's also inherently based on activities that young people would do. So music, fashion, this kind of stuff. And if you're interested in getting involved, there's a whole bunch of free resources on the site designed to help young people primarily get involved in these types of activities. So that's it. Also, if you want to talk about magic and digital technology, I spent 3 months at the Pervasive Media Studio last year doing a residency about how they align, which is where a lot of some of these ideas have come from as well. It's probably about time, do you reckon? Is it? 0 minutes. Look at that. We're all good. Thank you very much.